So, Hillary Clinton has finally finished being grilled by congressional Republicans in today's hearing into the devastating attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, 3 years ago. Let me just say very quickly, I don't know how these politicians managed to even just sit through these insufferably long, drawn out, tedious, boring hearings and I, I don't I honestly do not know how they do it. But I will say this: what this hearing has reminded me of is the gaffe made late last month by California Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy when he appeared on Fox News and was interviewed by none other than conservative talk show pundit Sean Hannity. Shoving both feet in his mouth at once, it seems, he said, and I quote, "Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. Untrustworthy, of course. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not fought." Now, of course, the Democrats immediately leaped on this golden opportunity, this gift from God, or so it would seem, using it to point out that Republicans are simply using this Benghazi pursuit in order to try to damage and tarnish Hillary Clinton as a presidential contender. Frankly, I think they're onto something. I think it's pretty clear that that is at least one of the motives that are driving congressional Republicans in their relentless pursuit of Hillary Clinton on this issue. But what this really brings to my mind is the importance of not getting stuck in what's known as a political echo chamber. It's a bad idea to surround yourself all the time with people who see the world the same way that you do, especially when it comes to politics. When I first sort of gravitated away from the political left and started on this journey throughout my college years that ended with me joining the libertarian movement, it really started about 10 years ago. In fact, exactly 10 years ago, in the fall of 2005. It was then that I took a course in constitutional interpretation with a great conservative professor at Princeton University by the name of Robert George. I was just reading an article about him earlier today. The article described how he has become a go-to expert consulted by almost every Republican presidential candidate. Now, when I took Con Interp with Professor George, which was reputed to be one of the toughest courses at Princeton, I didn't necessarily know what to expect when I started out, but once I got into it, not only did I develop a fascination with U.S. constitutional law that has oriented all my career decisions since then, I also found in Professor George himself a great teacher, largely because he's so intellectually humble and open-minded. Now, he's a rock-ribbed conservative, at least when it comes to social issues, but at the same time, he's willing to disagree with conservatives on some aspects of some issues. And he actively seeks out the company and the counsel of people who completely reject his politics. So, for example, while both men were still at Princeton, Professor George struck up a great friendship with none other than Professor Cornel West, an African-American religion scholar who is kind of a fire-breathing leftist pundit these days. He's actually gotten into a lot of noise with figures on the political left, most notably President Obama and a number of his defenders. Even someone as left-wing as Cornel West was still able to form a really great working and personal relationship with Professor George. They were able to establish certain amounts of common ground and understand each other's positions better when you actively seek out the company of people who disagree with your worldview. I think the main advantage is that it forces you to step up your game. One of the main advantages that I generally enjoy when I engage in discourse with my political opponents, my ideological opponents, is that I'm familiar with their worldview. Partly because I used to share it. I used to be pretty left-wing myself before I got to college, and more specifically before I took Professor George's course. But it's also partly because even in the years since I left the left, I've made a point of, seeking out the company of people who are on the political left. I'm more likely to know what kinds of arguments I'm going to encounter when I do argue with my counterparts on the left, and I'm more likely to make the most persuasive possible case for my own worldview and my own stances on particular issues. That is absolutely critical in, certainly in intellectual discourse. And I think it comes in handy in politics as well. Kevin McCarthy might not have been as likely to make the slip up that he made if he hadn't been talking to Sean Hannity, a conservative pundit, at Fox News, a conservative, cable news network that caters to an almost uniformly conservative viewership, really. If he had been giving that interview to CNN or God knows MSNBC, maybe Kevin McCarthy would not have been as likely to spill those beans. But he was so comfortable talking to Sean Hannity, who he knew sympathized with him, at least in the aggregate, that it made him sloppy. It made him less cautious than he should have been. And so he ended up saying the wrong thing. It certainly wasn't good for him or his party or his political cause. Dealing with people who reject your politics or other strongly held beliefs that you may have, it forces you to step up your game. It keeps you on your toes. You're less likely to get intellectually soft and argumentatively soft when you basically have sparring partners, if you will, intellectual sparring partners who come from the other side of the aisle. But when you do, like so many Americans have been doing in recent years, and there is actual actual academic research out there to support this, when you increasingly live and work and associate and go to school with people who already think the same way you do, where's the challenge? How are you going to be held to the most rigorous and demanding standard possible? How are you going to bring your A game when you keep giving yourself an easy ride? You're not going to get the kind of intellectual workout that you really need in order to keep your intellectual muscles in tip-top shape. It's good for you and for your political cause. It makes you a more effective and persuasive advocate for the viewpoints and the causes that you really care about. In addition to that, I think it's just the most civil and, praiseworthy way to deal with your fellow human beings. The fact is, we live in a world in which a great many people have a wide variety of opposing viewpoints. It's only good for all of us if we learn how to get along with each other and deal with each other in as peaceful and civil a manner as possible, instead of separating ourselves into competing camps that are constantly polarized, constantly butting heads, and that can't ever see eye to eye, find common ground, and work together to get things done. Don't let yourself get caught up in the political echo chambers, no matter what your beliefs are. Liberal, conservative, libertarian, socialist, moderate, what have you. Deal with people who don't share your worldview. Learn how to work with them, or at least how to debate their issues and their beliefs on their own level and on their own terms. You and your cause will only be stronger for it.